Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going over day 4 Bloomburrow spoilers, all the new combos, sweet synergies that are coming to standard and older formats as well. Let's start right off with the Byway Barter, which is a 3 mana 3/3 with Menace. It's a raccoon and a rogue, both relevant creature types. And it says whenever you expend 4, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. So again, expend is if you spend that much mana during your turn, you get the effect. So, and you have to spend it on spells, not abilities. So this is a pretty powerful effect, and it's kind of the effect that if you don't have any cards in your hand, you get to refill and draw 2. So very powerful if you can empty your hand. So the shock here is kind of representing maybe this would go well in a like mono red low to the ground sort of deck with a bunch of cheap spells or a burn sort of strategy. If you're able to play this on turn 4, if you play this, have 1 mana up, and then you chalk something, for example, then that would trigger the ability because 3 mana was spent on him and the 4th was spent on the shock. And then if that was the last card in your hand, you just draw 2 cards. And if you could just do that every turn, if you drew 2 cards and then you draw 1 card for your turn, the following turn, and you could spend 4 mana that next turn and then trigger this again, is basically drawing 2 extra cards every turn. Would be a really powerful ability. So in the right deck and kind of the right circumstances, I guess would have to line up for you to be able to expend 4 every turn. But if the average mana cost in your deck is like 2, for example, then that could work pretty well with this guy. It also could work up like with Rakdos joins up, for example, or some sort of it doesn't. I don't think it works with reanimation spells the way you want it to, because you have to target and then you'll discard. Um, but because the what you're targeting won't necessarily be in the graveyard to use its first ability. But Rakdos joins up because when it enters the battlefield, it triggers its ability. I think this would work. You could cast Rakdos joins up, you could discard your hand, and then you could reanimate something that was in your hand. So that's kind of the idea with that. And there's another enchantment in standard, I think, that reanimates something when it comes into play. So it would work kind of with that strategy if you're using it in a reanimator deck as well, or just maybe using its ability to put stuff into your graveyard and reanimate it later with a reanimation spell. So those are kind of the two thoughts I have with this guy. Let me know if you have any other ideas for him, but I think it's got potential definitely to draw 2 extra cards every turn is pretty powerful. Season of the Burough is up next, which is 5 mana sorcery. Choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. So it's again, all the seasons kind of do this. You can choose all the modes. So 1 paw is create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. 2 paws exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. 3 paws is return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from graveyard to battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. So pretty cool. The first mode is pretty powerful. You could, if you put all your paws into that, you just create 5 white rabbit creature tokens, which would be pretty cool with Phineas in a rabbit deck. That would, if you attacked with Phineas that same turn, all of them get +1/+1, and you trigger its ability to draw cards. So maybe this goes in a rabbit deck. Devilish Valley is rotating, sadly. I love that card, but it works well with it. You can play it in Pioneer now. If you went with Devilish Valet, this card gives you the 5 sort of creatures you need that come into play at the turn to make it Devilish Valet into a lethal attacker. I think it's a 32 power creature when it attacks. Let me know if that's wrong. And then the kind of other modes, you can kind of exile 2 non-land permanents, and then its opponents could draw a card. But what if you have a Sheldred out? Then making them draw cards, 2 cards, would make them lose 4 life. So maybe that's, you go turn 4 Sheldred, and turn 5 play this, exile their 2 things. They take 4, attack for 4, and they take 2 during their draw step. Maybe that would just kill them right there. So maybe into sort of some black-white mid-range deck. And then also the last mode to return anything, I think it's pretty powerful to give an indestructible counter to something. I was thinking like what would be the best target? Maybe like Zorlian in standard, because that would come into play and it would trigger its ability. But giving it indestructible would be pretty good because it has vigilance, so you can attack with it every turn, gain life, and then also hold it back on defense to block something every turn because it has indestructible. And then also every turn you could, if some of your other creatures dies, you could use its ability to return those back to play every turn. So seems like a pretty good target to give indestructible to. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about this one, but it seems like it's got some standard potential. Okay, next up we've got Starfall Invocation, which is a 5-mana sorcery with gift a card. Destroy all creatures if the gift was promised. Return a creature card put into your graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. So kind of a wrath effect, but also it has a mode if you want to return something that was put into your graveyard back. I thought like um, prototype creatures could be pretty good with this if you had a flesh gorger, because it would come back as the upgraded version, the full version of it. So it kind of like blinks one of your creatures. So that's an option if you're gifting a card. Um, and then also the anything with a good enter the battlefield trigger could be kind of cool. But the Kutzil's flanker is maybe really cool with this because of its first mode. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. So if you chose that to come back into play and you had a bunch of other tokens out that you destroyed, this could come back as +1/+1 for each other creature that also left the battlefield that you destroyed. So I don't know, maybe there's some synergy there. Not sure if this will see any play over the other wrath effects that we have, but it's got some cool potential. All right. Next up, we've got the Wishing Well, which is a 4-mana artifact. Put a coin counter on Wishing Well. When you do, you can cast target instant or sorcery with mana value equal to the number of coin counters on Wishing Well from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile instead, activate only as a sorcery. So I was thinking, like, is this good at all? I mean, definitely in like a spell slinger deck, it can help you recast your spells. So you can, the first time you tap it, you can cast a 1-mana spell, and then the second time a 2-mana spell. Note it has to be the exact mana cost, which kind of limits this in some way, but um, it could be good with like the Ruthless Negotiation, I was thinking, because it lets you cast it from your graveyard, and then you get the extra card draw on it. Also, maybe with Proliferate spells, if you are kind of like wanting to just get as many counters on this, so you can uh, like cheat out a good, like a big mana cost spell with the Wishing Well. You can tap it every turn as well, just to put a counter on it. You don't have to use it. So if you did have like a 7-mana spell in your graveyard that you're trying to cast, you could just kind of build up mana, so to speak, on the Wishing Well. But Proliferate would kind of help you get there faster, and then you could cast for example, you could cast Experimental Augury and proliferate it to 2, and then use it to tap it to cast the Augury again, and then proliferate again. So that's an option. And then Paradox Engine, maybe there's just like you every time you cast a spell, you get to untap all your non-land permanents and use this to tap to cast a spell, and so that kind of could combo off some. Maybe there's something there. An interesting card. Let me know what you think about this one as well. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, but it seems okay. I'm not sure if it's very specific in what it has to do, but maybe there's some sort of combo potential here. All right, next up we've got the Whisker Veil Forerunner, which is 4 mana, which is a mouse bard, and it's a 3/4 with Valiant. Whenever it becomes target of a spell or ability, for the first time, look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield if it's your turn, and if you don't, put it into your hand. And the rest on your bottom, your library in random order. So this is a really interesting card. Kind of like Collected Company-ish on a creature, kind of, sort of, when you target it. So I was thinking, like, okay, what can you do with this guy? Like, Skrelv is kind of sweet because if you can use Skrelv to protect him, but you just keep targeting him every turn. Anything that could target a creature every turn is potentially pretty good. And obviously, you'd want a good amount of creatures um, in your deck that cost 3 or less. So Skrelv could work there. Guardian Gearpore. So the thing about this guy is I think the rules work such that if you blink this guy and he comes back into play, he counts as you kind of reset the Valiant trigger here, so that then you could target him again and get another trigger. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is kind of counts as a new object because it's left play and come into play. So it would be then, so you could ephemerate it and then ephemerate it again, and ephemerate it again in the same turn. And by the same logic, you could Guardian of Gearpore it. It would trigger its ability. You could get a creature it would come back into play at the end step, and then you could blink it again during your end step, or target it again during your end step. Also with a Burough. So those are my ideas with this. I think just being able to target it every turn and get get a creature into play is pretty good. But it seems like with blink spells, maybe you could get the ability more than once every turn. So that's kind of the idea with that. All right, next up we've got the Season of Gathering, the 6-mana green one with 5 paws. You get 5 paws. And the 1 paw, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, gains vigilance and trample. 2 paws to choose artifact or enchantment, destroy all permanents of the chosen type. And then 3 paws, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So I don't know if this card is very good. It's probably not that great, but I thought it would be pretty funny, at least with Yargle. If you had Yargle out and you cast this, you could put 2+1/+1 counters on Yargle, make it a 20 power Trampler Vigilance, which may just kill your opponent right off the bat, and you'd also draw 20 cards. So I don't know, that could be pretty sweet, right? You gotta dream big here. And with your Graw, could be kind of cool because this actually curves your Graw on turn 5, for example. This on turn 6, you would destroy everything if you use the second mode to destroy all artifacts, because your Graw turns everything except for itself into a food artifact. So you destroy all your own creatures and all your opponent's creatures, and you get 2+1 counters on it for each thing that was destroyed. So it would clear the way for it to attack, right? And then it would be, I don't know, hopefully a pretty big creature if you had a bunch of creatures out. So that's another use for it. You could also just draw a bunch of cards off of it too, with your Grog, put more +1/+1 counters on it, give it vigilance and trample just in case. I don't know, those are my ideas. I don't know if this is a particularly competitive card. It's pretty high costed, but definitely some fun stuff you could do with it, and maybe some jank combo potential that may or may not be coming to this channel in the future. All right. Next up, we've got Helga, which is a 3 mana 1/3 frog druid legend, and Bant colors. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain 1 life, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can also tap to add mana of any one color, where X is its power. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. So it does work with X costs. So the Hydras and things like that would trigger this first ability. But I was thinking maybe this could see play in like modern-ish with or timeless with the pitch elementals, because those cost 4 or more. So every time you would play a pitch of grief or another one, for example, a pitch elemental, you draw a card, gain a life, put a counter on it. So you could kind of just go through your deck pretty quickly. Maybe in some sort of affinity deck, because Frogmites and Mirror Enforcers and all those, there's like a Frogmite Enforcer now. So maybe some Frog artifact theme deck would be pretty sweet with this guy. So you could kind of just like play a Frogmite, draw a Frogmite, play a Frogmite, draw another Mirror Enforcer, play a Mirror Enforcer, pump it up, then tap him to play anything else that you haven't played. There's that, what's the 7 mana one that draws 2 when it comes into play? Anyways, yeah, could be good in affinity deck potentially. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm not sure in standard. You basically have to pay full price for most of the creatures in standard, so there's no great way to use this. But yeah, maybe the Hydras would be pretty good, because you could play out a Hydra, trigger the ability, put a +1 counter on it, and then the next one you play, you could use its ability to pump more mana into it. So something along those lines could work potentially. Okay, and next up we've got Mockingbird, which is a blue and an X casting cost, a bird bard, 1/1. And it's got flying, and it says you may have Mockingbird enter the copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it is a bird in addition to its other types, and it's flying. So, on the surface, it's just a 1 mana 1/1 bird with flying, which may be okay. It kind of depends on the bird tribe and how good that is. But I was thinking, like, okay, this is like a cheap clone. You could, if there's a 1 mana creature or a 2 mana creature, all the other clone effects cost like 3 typically, or 4. in Magic's history. There maybe are a few that are cheaper than that. But being able to clone something, if you wanted to clone something that was 1 mana or 2 mana, this is a very efficient way to do that. And also could just be one flyer if you want. And standard things that kind of have like an additional cost maybe could be cool. Like Souls of the Lost would be a good card to copy with this, because then you wouldn't have to pay the additional cost, and it would just come into play as a Souls of the Lost, and then it would also be a Souls of the Lost with flying, which would be pretty good, giving it evasion. The Souls of the Lost can get pretty big. So that's one idea. The other idea is that it can just be 1 mana to copy any sort of token creature, because except for the ones in this set, the Offspring ones, I think those have mana costs, but any other token creatures have a mana cost of 0, I believe. So you could just, for example, the red flying dragon token with haste that Magda makes, that would be kind of nice if you had one of those out. You could just pay 1 and make a copy of it. And maybe also with, so again, just kind of like being a cheap lord could be pretty good if you copying lords kind of stacks up with each other. So if you had like a Valley Quest Caller, for example, on turn 2, and then you played this for 2 and copied the Valley Quest Caller, it would trigger the first ability. You could scry, and then they'd pump each other because they'd both be rabbits, and one would also be a bird, and one would also this bird would have flying. So maybe it's just kind of like getting some redundancy in your deck of having more lords would be pretty good, kind of like what Merfolk does. Could maybe even see play in a Merfolk deck. I don't know. Giving your Merfolk flying could be interesting. But yeah, those are kind of my ideas with this guy. Seems like he's got some potential here. Okay, next up we've got the Darkstar Augur, which is a 3 mana Bat Warlock 2/3 with Offspring for 1. So I think this is like the cheapest Offspring, or one of the cheapest Offspring costs we've seen so far. It's got flying. At the beginning of upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. Lose life equal to its mana value. So it's got kind of decent just in a bat tribal, because you can make an Offspring of him, and now you have multiple bats. Kind of works well with Zoraline again. Because Zoraline can return this back to play if it dies with its ability. But Zoraline also helps you gain life, which can offset the life loss from this. So it seems like it'll work pretty well with the Bat tribe of kind of benefiting from gaining life every turn, because it'll offset the life loss. And then maybe in older formats, you just kind of like Dark Ritual this out on turn 2 and get 2 of them. And then the rest of your deck is just like cheap discard spells. Like you have turn 1 Thoughtseize, take your counter spell or whatever. Turn 2 Dark Ritual, play, get 2 of these guys, and then draw 3 cards every turn. That could be kind of sweet. I don't know. Maybe in Timeless. So that's something I'm thinking about. Definitely a value card. I mean, the other home for this is probably just some like black aggro deck, or low to the ground aggro deck, or like a red-black aggressive deck with all 1-drops. Could be pretty good. Okay, next up we've got Wick the World Mind, which is a 4 mana 2/4 legendary rat warlock. And when it or another rat you control enters, put a or create a 1/1 black snail creature token, and if you don't control a snail, otherwise put a +1/+1 counter on the snail you control. So that basically you get a snail, and then it just buffs the snail. 3 mana to sack a snail, and it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent, and then draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. So basically what this wants you to do is to just get as many rats into play as possible after you play this. So you can kind of curve into Lord Skitter into this, and then Lord Skitter could trigger, and you get the snail right away to get some value out of it. Or with Songs of Toad and Taunts, just put a bunch of rat tokens into play, trigger the sponge to get a big snail, and then sacrifice it. I don't know. This card doesn't seem like super powerful. It kind of will depend on, I guess, the rat tribal stuff that we got going on, really, to determine just how good it is. But maybe it could be like a one of in the rat deck to just kind of get some extra value out of all the rats that come into play. Yeah, we'll see. All right, next up we've got the Hearthborn Battler, which is a 3 mana 2/3 lizard warlock with haste. And it says whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, deals 2 damage to target opponent. And so with the plot mechanic, this could be kind of sweet. For example, with Demonic Ruckus, if you have that on plot, you play this on 3, and then you cast it right away. You'll get the trigger for the second spell. So that could be kind of cool. Or like 0 mana spells and older formats could trigger this right away. Or if you had like a 1 mana spell and you play this on turn 4, and then you play Shock again, for example, that could be decent. It triggers committing crimes, so it could be okay with Magda. So if you could commit a crime on your turn, it could also commit a crime on your opponent's turn, because it would trigger when your opponent plays 2 spells. And then maybe it kind of works well with Mistbreath Elder, because it's bouncing creatures back to your hand and then give you another thing to play, so you can kind of continually play 2 spells every turn. So, I mean, if you can continually trigger this guy every turn and your opponent's triggering every turn, I mean, 4 damage per turn cycle is really, really good, obviously. And then attacking with him potentially too. But it kind of depends on, like, I guess, your opponent's deck in the metagame, how good this is going to be. If nobody's like double spelling really, then it's not a very good card, obviously. So yeah, I don't know. This one's kind of up to debate, and also kind of depends on the lizard tribe too. We're gonna have to see 100% how much being a lizard really matters. There's some lizard cards thus far, and they do kind of trigger off of um, damaging your opponent. So then there could be some synergies there that we're not aware of as well. So we'll see on this guy, but I kind of like him. All right, and next up we've got For the Common Good, which is a double X green sorcery. Create X tokens that are copies of target token you control. The tokens you control gain indestructible until your next turn, which is pretty cool. And then you gain 1 life for each token you control. So notably, you could just copy any kinds of tokens, like treasure tokens, for example, to kind of ramp you a little bit. But it's like, what is the best creature that in standard that you could copy this? So maybe again the Scorpion Dragon from Magda would be pretty good to copy. So like if you did this for 5 mana, you get 2 copies of those dragons, and then they're indestructible and they have haste and flying. Swing for a lot of damage probably and gain some life. That seems pretty strong. Also with Gruff Triplets, for example, that's a pretty good one to copy, because then they all kind of stack with each other, and giving them indestructible would be pretty good. So yeah, those are kind of the ones I could think of. Maybe there's some other tokens in standard you really want to copy with this, but let me know in the comments about this guy. Okay, so now we got some uncommons to look at. We got Bandits Talent, which is a 2 mana enchantment class. And when it enters, each opponent discards 2 cards unless they discard a non-land card. So basically, they could discard 2 lands or a non-land card. And then 1 mana at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep. If they have 1 or fewer cards, they lose 2 life. And then 4 more mana, level 3, at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card for each opponent who has 1 or fewer cards at hand. So this card obviously just wants your opponent to, it's kind of like a rack effect, to have as little cards in hand as possible, 1 or fewer cards. And there's some cards in standard already that kind of could work with this. Maybe there's some sort of rack deck that would be good, like Hopeless Nightmare does something similar, like they have to discard a card and lose life. And there's ways to sort of bounce that and reuse it. Maybe Rankle's Prank could go in this deck, because you can have each player discard cards, lose life, sack creatures if you're not playing any creatures. So maybe there's some sort of rack deck in standard. Aggressive Sabotage perhaps kind of does something similar. I don't know. Let me know what you think about this one as well. Seems like it's like on the cusp of being playable, but not bad. Okay, next up we've got Gossip's Talent, which is another class enchantment for 2 mana. This whenever a creature you control enters, Surveil 1. And it has a 2 mana to whenever you attack, target attacking creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. 4 mana whenever a creature you control does combat damage to a player, you may exile it, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So I'm not sure about these other levels. It seems a bit expensive to just to get the like unblockable potential and the blinking effect of level 3. But like, how could you best use this first one? Maybe in sort of these self-mill decks that have like Narcomoeba, Blood Gas, Prize Amalgam, a bunch of other creatures that kind of come back from the graveyard. So if you had this out and then you milled over an Narcomoeba would come to play, then you get to surveil one. Then that could surveil another Narcomoeba or a Blood Gas or a Prize Amalgam, and then that would come into play, and that would then surveil one, and that could surveil another creature. So it could really kind of just kind of spiral off here, potentially. I don't know if that's good enough. It is, I guess 2 mana is a little expensive for like older formats here, but maybe it's pretty good. I'm not sure. That's one we kind of have to test out and see if that's actually worth it or not. But I thought it had some potential in that kind of shell. So let me know what you think. All right, next up we've got the Daring Wave Rider. I love the art on this. It's pretty sweet. I want to be this otter wizard right here. He looks like he's having a good old time. So it's 6 mana for 4/4. When it enters, you may cast target instant sorcery spell with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile instead. So I don't know. It's probably just like a limited card, but maybe there's some combos here with like making copies of it. Because if you cast like Seed Double to make a copy of it, then the copy would come into play, and you can cast another Seed Double right away, make another copy of it. If you had another Seed Double in your graveyard, you could kind of keep going. It will exile it, so it's not infinite, just the 2 of those. But also maybe it's like a reanimation target with Late to Dinner comes back into play, then you get to cast Late to Dinner again. Comes back into play, so kind of cool with reanimation spells. There may be just better cards that do similar things, but I don't know. I love the art, so it's got some combo potential. But yeah, that's the Daring Wave Rider. Okay, next up we've got a couple more here. The Long River Lurker and the Splash Portal. I'm gonna put these together. They both blink stuff, and so the Long River Lurker is 3 mana, 2/3 Frog Scout. Other frogs get ward and has ward. And when it enters, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Whenever that creature does combat damage this turn, you may exile it. If you do, return to the battlefield. So it can blink. I was thinking of prototype creatures would be kind of cool to blink. So like you go turn 2 Rootwire Amalgam, turn 3 Long River Lurker, make it unblockable. Get in for 2, blink it, comes back as a 5/5. Could be okay. Or other prototype creatures such as the Combat Thresher would be pretty sweet to make unblockable because it's got double strike, and then you'd also blink it and come back in, you draw another card. So maybe some synergy there. I'm not sure. And then also the token of the Rootwire Amalgam is a pretty good one to make unblockable as well. I'm just thinking about that right now. And Splash Portal is also just like a 1 mana, very efficient blink spell. So maybe Combat Thresher, like on turn 4, you could cast it, draw a card, blink it, draw another card, comes back as a 3/3 double strike. Seems decent, and then draw another card if you had a bird or frog out. So maybe it just goes in the sort of frog archetypes, but maybe there's some combo potential here with prototype creatures as well. Okay, and last up we've got the Husk Burster Swarm, which is a 8 mana elemental insect, 6/6, and it costs 1 less to cast for each creature card you own in exile and in your graveyard. It's got Menace and Death Touch. So I think this card could see play in Standard in sort of the self-milled decks. There's been cards like this that are very similar that never saw any play. So the thing that distinguishes this card, though, is that it says Exile, cards in Exile. And so in older formats like Modern, maybe this this is a deck. I don't really play Modern too much, but this would be there's ways to just exile stuff from your deck that for 0 mana, like before the game even begins, such as Serum Powder or Devour of Destiny or Gemstone Caverns. So if you just like Serum Powdered, if your deck was like half creatures and this guy was in it, you Serum Powdered twice or once and you Devoured of Destiny, you'd exile 4 cards plus 7 cards. Of those 11 cards, if 7 of them were creatures, you could play it on turn 1, right? So I don't know, maybe there's something there. Maybe not, it's total jank, but sounds like that could be kind of cool. I mean, a menace 6/6 menace death touch on turn one is nothing to scoff at. So, um, or just turn two, not bad on turn two either if you haven't exiled the amount that 7 cards, but 7 creatures. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about that. Thanks so much for watching. That is the end of the combo review for today. I appreciate you so much. Um, yeah, let me know what you're thinking about this set. There's a lot of cool cards, a lot of cool archetypes coming, and I think it's really going to shake up a few different formats standard, especially because of rotation coming. That is definitely exciting as well. So it's going to be the weekend. We'll see if we get some spoilers for the weekend. Otherwise, I will come back on Monday and do some more spoilers then. All right. Thanks so much, and I will see you in the next video.